Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer right or wrong, raping children.
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens.
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States.
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice.
She didn't ask Bondi a single question. That was the first move. And it was the most calculated thing that happened in that room all day. Jasmine Crockett walked into that hearing, looked at the Attorney General of the United States sitting directly across from her, and announced to the entire committee that she had no intention of addressing her. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had already decided that Pam Bondi wasn't going to answer anything honestly anyway. So she turned to her colleague instead. Right or wrong, raping children? Wrong. Right or wrong, killing random citizens? Definitely wrong. Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States? Definitely wrong. 3 questions, 3 answers, 30 seconds. And the implication hanging in the air of that hearing room was impossible to miss. Those are the questions Bondi wouldn't answer. So Crockett got the answers somewhere else. On the record, in front of the cameras, with Bondi sitting right there watching it happen.
In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had 2 main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, we know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided. We know that threatened prosecution against students protesting your actions and forced tech companies to remove apps used to track ISIS activities. But let's circle back to you protecting pedophiles and creeps, because I want to talk about the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein, but unlike this administration, I believe that facts matter. So let's talk about the facts. Fact number 1, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number 2, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, this is a good one. Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. What's crazy about all of this is just that this is a big cover-up. And this administration is engaged in it. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history.
Jasmine Crockett began with Bondi's own words. In Bondi's written testimony, she had stated that when she took office, she entered with two central goals. First, to end what she described as the weaponization of justice. Second, to return the Department of Justice to its core mission. Crockett let those promises hang in the room for a brief moment. Then she answered them directly. "Not only have you lied about both," she said, "you have intentionally done the exact opposite." That word, intentionally, carried real weight. It was not a charge of incompetence. It was not a suggestion of poor management. It was not a claim that Bondi had tried and failed. It was an accusation of deliberate reversal. That Bondi knew the promises she made, understood them, presented them publicly, then chose to move in the opposite direction on purpose. That is a serious allegation to level at a sitting attorney general in a congressional hearing room. And Crockett was only beginning. She moved immediately to journalists. She named Don Lemon. She named Georgia Fort. Both, she said, had been arrested under DOJ direction. Then Crockett did something hearings often avoid. She laid out institutional rejection. A judge had already refused an earlier attempt to arrest Don Lemon. A grand jury had rejected the case against Senator Kelly. A grand jury had rejected the case against Senator Slotkin. The case against Letitia James had been dismissed. The case against James Comey had been dismissed. She listed them one by one, not as rhetoric, as a record. 5 matters, 5 failures, 5 instances where actions brought forward under DOJ leadership were turned back by judges, juries, or legal process. Then she delivered the line that reframed the hearing. "You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps." That sentence was built carefully. It was more than an accusation. It was a forced comparison. It required listeners to hold 2 images at once: journalists being arrested and child predators walking free. And it tied both outcomes to the same leadership priorities. Crockett's message was blunt. The Department of Justice had selected the wrong targets. Then she turned to Jeffrey Epstein, and the room changed. This was where the exchange moved beyond a standard partisan clash. Crockett did not begin with opinion. She did not begin with speculation. She began with 4 words: facts matter. So let's talk about the facts. Then she started counting. Fact number 1. Donald Trump was one of the most frequently named people in the Epstein files. Not mentioned once. Not referenced casually. According to Crockett, at least 5,000 files contained references, with more than 38,000 mentions of Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. 38,000 references. That number was designed to sit heavily in the room. Fact number 2. According to the files, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to Trump, who then spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Fact number 3. FBI investigator notes in those files described Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump. Notes that, according to Crockett, recorded Epstein bragging directly to Trump. This is a good one. Then Crockett paused and drew a line carefully. She said explicitly, "I'm not saying the president is a pedophile." That mattered, because she was distinguishing between accusation and documentation. She was not claiming criminal guilt. She was reading from materials she said were in the files. She was describing what investigators recorded and what had been released. Then she drew the narrower conclusion those documents, in her view, supported. There is a lot of evidence in these files that suggest he is very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. That is a statement about proximity, association, the company someone kept. She did not ask the audience to trust her opinion. She used the files as the speaker. Then Crockett named what she believed the larger problem was. This administration is complicit, she said, not as flourish, as description. She pointed to a closed investigation, released files with redactions, a July 2025 memo stating there was no evidence to pursue Epstein's clients, and tens of thousands of references involving one politically powerful figure in those same records. Then she widened the frame again. She referenced what she described as DOJ attempts to obstruct investigations into federal agents accused of killing American citizens. She referenced seizure of voter data from Fulton County, which she characterized as an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections. She named Tom Homan and alleged tape-recorded bribery claims that, in her telling, were never properly pursued. She referenced a proposed payment to the president that she said violated the Constitution's limits on presidential compensation. Each allegation came with a name, a place, a document, a recording. Then she closed hard. You will be remembered as one of the worst attorneys general in history. An attorney general who prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. Then she yielded her time. The room was already loud, and Bondi was given the floor. What Bondi chose not to address was as notable as what she did address. She did not respond to the 38,000 references. She did not address the FBI notes involving Mar-a-Lago. She did not directly answer the 5 failed prosecutions Crockett had listed. She did not respond to the journalist arrests. She did not engage the witness statements. She did not explain the voter data allegations. Instead, she turned elsewhere. She noted that Crockett had not condemned Hakeem Jeffries for allegedly accepting money from Epstein after Epstein's conviction. Then she began reading names. Convicted criminals in Texas. Criminals in states represented by Democrats. People convicted of violent crimes who were in the country illegally. That was the response. Not a denial of the documentary claims. Not a rebuttal to the numbers Crockett placed on the record. Not an explanation for why 38,000 references did not justify scrutiny. Not an explanation for why the July 2025 memo closed the Epstein client matter while those references existed. A pivot to Jeffries. And a list of criminals from other states. Then a congressman from Kansas spoke. He thanked Bondi for appearing. He called the proceedings a spectacle. He said it was sad. He said he ran for Congress to solve serious problems. And he said the performance that day, gesturing toward Crockett and others, had not increased his confidence that they were up to the task. But he did not mention the 38,000 references. He did not mention the victim transported to Mar-a-Lago. He did not mention the rejected prosecutions. He thanked Bondi for professionalism and moved on. And that gap became the story. Not the yelling, not the tone, not who looked composed, not who sounded angry. The gap between what was placed on the record and what was actually answered. Crockett stood with documents, with files the Department of Justice itself had released, with FBI notes, with numerical claims she said were publicly documented. She read them aloud. She labeled them facts. She drew a narrow conclusion centered on association rather than direct criminal accusation. And the Attorney General responded by reading names of criminals from Texas. That contrast is the substance. Crockett then returned to victims. Over 1,000 survivors in those files, and in that history, she argued. Yet not one abuser criminally held accountable. Not one client prosecuted. Not one man whose name appears tens of thousands of times in federal records brought before a grand jury. Crockett said directly, "You're protecting pedophiles and creeps." Bondi objected to accusations of that kind. But accusations require rebuttal, and rebuttals require engagement with substance. According to the record Crockett described, that engagement did not happen. The files remained. The 38,000 references remained. The Mar-a-Lago investigator notes remained. The July 2025 memo remained. The 5 failed prosecutions remained part of public record. Crockett yielded her time. Bondi read names from Texas. A congressman from Kansas called it a sad spectacle. And the record remained exactly where Crockett left it.